Welcome to eFlexonics. My wife and I have decided to combine our newest podcast show, Chit Chat with Rick and Pat, with our business blog. After all, owning your own business and following your passion can be your ultimate dream come true, but we all need to relax now and then in order to unwind from the stress and rigors of our busy lifestyles. Our adventure begins with our travel agents at Sears. I personally know some of the agents in our local area and trust their opinion concerning our tastes, lifestyle choices, and adventure planning, so we were very pleased when they chose the cruise line Celebrity. Pat and I had done quite a bit of research, and the Celebrity line kept coming up at the top of our list as well. We live very close to Vancouver, BC, and wanted to depart from Vancouver in order to enjoy some homegrown experiences. As well, the ship we were on, called the Millennium, was making their departure from Vancouver for the last year, deciding instead to move their Alaska cruise starting point from Seattle. So we thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to cruise out of our home port. If you've never been on a cruise before, we invite you to grab a cup of coffee, put your feet up, and enjoy this special podcast, because what we're about to show you will most likely motivate you to start perusing travel brochures and discussing arrangements with your travel agent almost immediately. This was our first cruise, but we can honestly tell you that, in our opinion, it is the ultimate form of relaxation and adventure we have ever enjoyed. So let's show you some pictures to explain exactly what to expect, who you can meet, what you can eat, how you can relax, and many other ways to enjoy a vacation where almost every single request is met with warm and friendly smile and a helpful attitude from all of the incredible staff that works on that beautiful ship. Just standing in line to board the ship itself is exciting. The look on people's faces, the chatter between couples, families, and friends, knowing that in a few short hours thousands of tourists would be in complete wonderment of nature when walking the decks of the Millennium. Celebrity even allowed us to board a few hours early in order to get settled. We actually got on board the ship at 11 a.m. and weren't expected to walk on deck until about 1 in the afternoon, so we were delighted that we could have a snack and check out the ship before being escorted to our cabin. Now, I have to point out that I love podcasting and never seem to get enough time to put together video and audio creations. So the first picture is of our cabin, which was quite spacious in that it had a nicely appointed bedroom, washroom, and a large shower. It had adequate storage space, and the reason I say adequate is because of my Pelican case that I decided to take with us that has almost all of my mobile podcasting equipment that takes up over half the bed, as you can see. And when it's placed in our closet, it just barely fit on the bottom of the closet, but it did fit. In the cabin, there is a safe for all of your valuables, which is a nice touch, and the Celebrity offers amenities found in most five-star hotels, such as dry cleaning and laundry service, room service, of course, and every cabin has a television in the cabins that will tell you interesting facts about the ship, the wide variety of shows, bars, casinos, restaurants, health clubs, and exercise programs with personal trainers, massage and beauty treatments, and much more, as well as excursions that are offered at every single port of call. After we settled into our cabin and packed everything away for the journey, we decided to get some fresh air and have a walk around the upper decks of the ship. This picture shows a skyline of Vancouver, looking toward the downtown center. The weather was quite comfortable for a September day, and we found that we could comfortably walk the ship only wearing lightweight jackets. Standing on the deck gave us another perspective of the city that you seldom get from the ground. Considering we were 10 or 11 decks up, Vancouver is quite a unique city in that you can go swimming in the ocean in the morning in the summertime and end up skiing on a glacier in the afternoon. If you look closely toward the distance to the right of the picture, there are a collection of white sails, and that is the Pan-Pacific, where there is another cruise ship either just coming back or in dock for the Alaska cruise as well. Our excitement mounted as the ship began to leave the harbor. You'll notice that not many people ventured onto the upper decks, probably because they were still settling into their cabins, while Pat and I preferred to catch a glimpse of the ship going underneath the Ironsworker Bridge. You'll notice that there's a red painted stripe on the deck just center of the picture. We later learned that this is a guide for a walking course that we would need to go on every day in order to work off that fantastic food that seemed to surround you almost everywhere you go on the ship. Here is the view from above, looking down at several pools as well as hot tubs that are located outside. You'll notice the lush green trees that are surrounding the ship as she begins to work her way out of the harbor and onto the route that will take us to a very lonely land where thousands of men and women were smitten with the gold bug, packed up all of their belongings and risked all they had ever known in order to at least taste the promise of striking it rich with gold. It impressed both Pat and I that the ship was continually being maintained, swept, cleaned, scrubbed, and sanitized. In this picture, you will see a workman putting the finishing touches on one of the many lively bars that are part of the onboard entertainment. Here's another picture of the pools and hot tubs. Now, ordinarily, these pools will be full of tourists attempting to escape from the heat and refresh themselves. But on this trip, the scenery and the climate dictate the habits of the guests. The hot tubs were getting used quite regularly. You know, there's nothing nicer than soaking in a hot tub with the steam gently floating off the water, viewing some of the most rugged coastlines in North America, sipping on a cocktail of your choice. Talking about hot tubs, here's Pat relaxing in one of the finest cruise ships in the world. When you book an Alaskan cruise, you go through a mental process of what it might feel like, what you might experience, how the trip might make you feel, and try to imagine all of the visual highlights of the trip. But it pales in comparison to actually living the adventure. Shortly after taking this picture, I joined Pat in the hot tub and settled in for a nice long soak. As soon as you feel the warm water begin to soak deeply into your bones, give yourself the luxury of closing your eyes and just use your sense of hearing. Soon, you'll pick up sounds of people chattering as they walk by, and occasionally you'll hear a unique screech and try to distinguish what kind of sound it was. You open your eyes for just a brief moment while looking up and notice an eagle soaring above the ship. You are on a luxurious floating hotel that is taking you into a fantasy world of craggy coastlines, lonely outposts, ice-choked glacier fields, and culturally rich heritage ports, all in the space of 10 days. This kind of travel could very easily become habit-forming. After a soak in the hot tub that helps to recharge your batteries, we had to check out one of the many quaint but classy bars on the Millennium. One that caught our eye immediately was called Michael's Lounge, which had incredibly comfortable seating and a picturesque curved wall that wraps you in a soft blanket of pastel colors that encourages you to linger and just observe what it is to further relax with a snack and a beverage. I must tell you that I was like being a kid in a candy store. Everywhere we went, I was wearing all my senses seemingly in front of me like a radar dish because I didn't want to miss a single thing on our trip. The Millennium prides itself on its food, level of customer service, and experience, as well as its attention to detail. Helpful and extremely friendly staff are always within easy access, and they go to great lengths to ensure your requests, from the most basic to the unusual, are met quickly and courteously. The Millennium has a well-appointed library in case you forget a book to read. Personally, I'm a huge Clive Cussler fan and own every single book he's ever written. If you're an avid reader and find that you just don't have time to enjoy the books you love, consider an internet service called Audible. It's an audio version of books that you can enjoy on your iPod, CD player, in your car, or any other MP3 player that you use. They have thousands of audiobooks from professional voice-over actors that allow you to listen to the book instead of sitting down in order to enjoy the written word. You can also get a free audiobook to try out the service. Try them out at www.audible.com. Once you try a book in audio form, you may enjoy that form of reading and even expand your learning experience, as there are many audiobooks on self-improvement, business development, entertainment, reference guides, and much more. And if you're a Clive Cussler fan like myself, there are several of his books on Audible as well. Imagine 100 years ago paddling a Hudson's Bay canoe through icy inlets in order to bring your boat, heavily laden with furs, to market. Often the journey would take weeks or months in order to navigate the wide variety of challenges that face the hardy men and women who chose to live a trapper's lifestyle. Tearing yourself away from the incredible scenery is not an easy task. That is, of course, until you walk down the spacious corridors and grand staircases until you arrive at yet another nightclub bar with a baby grand piano sitting in the center of a circular raised platform. Notice the walls of windows that wrap their way around the bar from one side to the other. In the evenings, softly played, easy listening music can be enjoyed while visiting with friends you will no doubt meet on the trip. As you will see us do later in this podcast, I personally have noticed that the culture on the ship can change just by walking to another part of the ship. There are cozy and casual nooks and crannies to read a book, play a game of cards, complete a crossword puzzle, or just watch the scenery float by. Or you can walk a few minutes to a very sophisticated, classy, and elegant five-star restaurant for a delicious culinary experience, complete with wine pairing with every course. I have to admit, I'm a hot tub freak. So it was with great enthusiasm that we discovered a huge saltwater hot tub that was the size of a pool. Do you notice the bubbles coming out of the saltwater pool? This is just a little bit of heaven. In that particular pool, there are metal bars that run along the edge horizontally and allow you to recline just like a zero-gravity chair. Incorporated into the seating bars are holes that force water jets, and that is what you're seeing as the water ripples. Every day of the cruise found me starting my day in the morning with at least 1 hour soak in this hot pool. Look up to the ceiling and you will notice that it's all glass, allowing tourists to enjoy these health-based pools in any kind of weather. A smart move, considering the trip to Alaska forces the thermometer to plummet as we work out of our way the coastlines to our first stop. Just out of view of this picture is a health-related food bar where you can climb out of the hot tub, walk just a few feet, and enjoy all kinds of fresh fruit, cereals, juices, smoked salmon, muffins, yogurts, granola, and many other choices for breakfast you could think of. Then, at lunchtime, you can get an endless supply of healthy choice fruits, veggies, soups, and salads. I couldn't have been more satisfied to make this my permanent resting spot on the ship, but there was much more to see, do, and experience. Before we leave the specialty spa area, here's a chance to see the therapy pool. Here was my secret recipe. Get in the pool, recline on the special cradle bars, read a book for about 20 minutes, then snooze and float for 10 minutes while deep breathing. Then go back to reading the book for another 20 minutes and repeat that process a few times. For me, this was the ultimate relaxation therapy that combined the massaging actions of the water jet with the healing properties of the salt water. Another advantage of salt water is that it certainly is not as harsh as a chlorine-based pool, and it softens the skin as well. Many times I fell asleep in this pool while being gently cradled by the jets. The stress of everyday life was already beginning to be replaced with one relaxation experience after another. After all, cruising is supposed to be the ultimate in a pampered vacation, and I was in a world that had but few rules, and one of those rules was to unwind and let go of any cares or concerns that you left behind when the ship pulled out of harbor. I would invite you to explore the ship in its entirety. There are hidden gems tucked away that are off the beaten path. My love of gardening is shared with my wife, and we stumbled upon an incredible conservatory with a glass-painted staircase that wound around until you arrived at a gardener's paradise. And at the top of the rounded glass-enclosed gardens, you were greeted with an inviting sun-bathed seating area. Another great place to read a book, listen to a podcast, take pictures, or just chat with your significant other and discuss what might be on the dinner menu that evening. Now, let's talk about the food, beverages, and newfound friends. Does this look like a couple who are enjoying themselves? Trust me, Everything that the staff does on this ship is well thought out and delivered with understated elegance. They don't just plop off a menu and come back for an order a few minutes later. They present an auditory narration of what is fresh, in season, suggested from the chef's table, or an interesting meal that you may not have ventured to try before the cruise. And why not? You're on holidays, and that means that you should try new ways of eating, visiting, communicating, and reacting with others as well as with yourself. I enjoy a good Caesar, and my wife enjoys a vodka martini with olive juice. It's called a dirty martini. The waiters offer suggestions based on your palate or adventure scale if you've always wanted to try that thing on the menu but didn't have the courage to try it. Our suggestion? Go ahead. No matter what happens to end up on your plate, you can be assured that the food will be carefully prepared using only the freshest ingredients, as well as any special requests you may have if you're on some kind of restrictive diet. Don't be afraid to ask, because there's almost no request for food they can't create. This was the first evening dinner for us that actually set the standard, and we were never disappointed with the selection of edible delights. Let's talk about the people we met on board. When we initially booked our cruise, we thought it would be a good idea to have an early evening dinner sitting. On most, if not all cruises, they will space out several hours between the early first sitting and the later second sitting. We wanted to have time during the evening to enjoy the nightlife, so we opted for the early setting and met the most entertaining, interesting, and fun-filled couples that made our cruise magical. Here's one of the couples that we met. His name is Max, and her name is Berna, and there were another couple as well that we'll introduce to you on the next picture. Here's how almost every single evening meal would start out. We would collectively gather at the table for dinner and have a cocktail before deciding what to eat. During the conversation, we got along so well with the other 4 people at our table that after the meal was over, we'd be talking, laughing, discussing, and playfully heckling each other that in every single instance, one of the waiters would have to come over to our table and ask if we wouldn't mind moving to a lounge or nightclub because the second dinner sitting was about to begin, and they had to clear our table for the next group. Here's the fascinating part. There was a 3-hour gap between our sitting and the second sitting, and every single evening meal, we were the very last ones in the entire dining room to leave because we just got caught up in the conversations with our newfound friends that even we were surprised at how fast 3 hours could pass so quickly. Max and Berna were a dynamic duo who were quick with a joke, had high-intensity wit, and were a pure pleasure to be around. We ended up chumming around with these 2 off-the-wall travel mates for most of the cruise. Now, let's introduce Sharon and Jerry, who were so full of stories that you just couldn't get enough of their bigger-than-life snippets. These 2 were soaking up every little bit of conversation at the table, and Sharon had the most infectious laugh I've ever heard. Jerry loved to gamble and play the horses, and we often would turn to the subject of politics, something that no self-respecting North American would ordinarily do. But this group of ne'er-do-wells, we would proclaim how we would run the government, solve world hunger, stop all wars, and create world peace. We would simply suggest that everyone should take a cruise, and there would be not one bit of turmoil that would enter your thoughts, and everyone would be in a great mood. That's how we would have handled it. Jerry was a strictly meat and potatoes kind of guy, and the rest of the table would constantly bait him into trying something different. Sometimes it worked, and Jerry had to admit that life was worth catching a few curveballs and trying a new taste sensation. I remember carefully watching his face every time we convinced him to push his taste buds to the limit and order something a little exotic. And when it arrived, he would look at it with a curious look on his face, then look each one of us in the eye and say, "Now, you're sure I'm going to like this?" We assured him that he would, and taking his fork in hand, half closing his eyes in anticipation, gently placing a small amount of the delicacy in his mouth and chewed. Then, as we all leaned into his direction, a smile would slowly creep across his face, and the entire table would erupt in cheers and high fives because he had to admit he really did like it. With friends like that, we always looked forward to going to the evening meal. Oh, and Max is Scandinavian and has quite a Swedish accent. He isn't able to properly pronounce his J's. You should have seen me as I chuckled so hard I almost fell off my chair to ask him to say this sentence. I want to have a glass of orange juice with Jerry in Juneau. It came out sounding something like this. I want to have a glass of orange juice with Jerry in Juneau. Then Jerry would counter with a line like, Max, are you sure I would enjoy that? And the table would start giggling for another 10-minute sessions. Food without laughter is just food. Food with great friends is indeed good for the soul. We miss them all very much, and we're planning to take another cruise with Max and Berna within the next few years. I really should have been a food critic. No, I take that back. I get way too much pleasure from food, and it would seem almost shameful to enjoy a career that much. Case in point. Look at this picture of my chicken dinner. Now, I admit that I'm a sauce guy. Love to smother almost everything in some kind of sauce, and there's no shortage of choices. And if you don't see a sauce, I could always ask the waiter to make one up for me. From the first savory nibble of the appetizer to the last intriguing crumbs of the dessert, my taste buds were on high alert. I know good cooking, and I've dined at some of the most established restaurants in Vancouver. But Celebrity Line somehow manages to transport you to another dimension when it comes to nutrition. Just wait. When you see what we have in store later in this podcast, you'll be phoning your travel agent while your mouth waters. Trust me on this. For those who love Cornish game hen, here is a sight to be etched into the far reaches of your mind. My advice? Diet for a few months before you go on a cruise, because you might as well throw your willpower off the top deck of the ship when leaving port. I literally inhaled almost every bit of food I could get my hands on, but surprisingly didn't gain an ounce. My wife, on the other hand, ate very carefully, went on a doctor-controlled diet before the cruise, and still managed to gain 10 pounds. I told her that it was because I laughed more than anyone else at the dinner table, and the motion of laughing increased my metabolism to the point where it was impossible for my body to gain weight. When we got back from the cruise, and because my wife had mysteriously gained the extra pounds, she had to go out and buy a variety of new clothes. Guess who's laughing now? I have since learned to keep my mouth shut. There was smoke coming out of her Visa card after her visit to the mall. Let's carry on, shall we? The memory of that particular shopping trip could have paid for another cruise, but you know the old saying, happy wife, happy life. The dessert menu was sinful. Our waiter said that if we wanted more than one dessert, simply ask for it, and it would arrive within minutes. In this picture, you'll see Berna has her arm around our waiter because she couldn't decide which one to take, and she wasn't going to give it up without a fight. If you think the food was comforting on board, you should see the Grand Theater. Here's a picture showing the tiered seating with lighted beverage tables in the lower sections. I'm an electronics and computer technician, and whenever I see a sound system with complicated electronics controlling it, I get curious as to how it's going to sound and how it's going to deliver quality. This theater does not have a bad seat in the house. Pat and I purposely sat in different sections, and the sound quality was top-notch, with absolutely no dead zones at all. The amount of time, materials, workmanship, and talent that goes into delivering a top-notch audio and video presentation is simply staggering, and Celebrity hit the mark on all counts. From the soft tinkling melody of a baby grand piano to the powerful and dynamic rendition of a full orchestra, the experience was magnificent night after night. In this picture, we wanted to give you an example of the before and after status of the theater. The shows ran the entire spectrum of emotions and themes, as well as cultural diversity. On any given night, whenever the theater was showing a presentation, there was an air of quiet anticipation, because you knew that whatever was described in the program, it was going to not only meet your expectations, but exceed them on a continual basis. And that's difficult for any kind of theater to do. You are about to enter a mystical place on board the Millennium. It is a specialty restaurant called the Olympic, and was the actual sister ship to the Titanic. After the Olympic was decommissioned, Some of the wood panels and other interior decorations were sold to an Englishman and were installed inside his personal residence. Celebrity Cruise Lines tracked down the owner and purchased many of the original wood panels and other articles and had them installed on this most luxurious dining establishment. Now, you had to pay a little bit extra for dining in the Olympic, but once you indulge yourself in this unique environment, you'll be talking about that experience for years to come. Let's take you inside the restaurant and show you some of the amenities. Fine linen on the tables, crystal glass, high-end china. The mood is truly set for you to be pampered, cared for, and spoiled. Have a seat and look around at the old-world elegance and charm, the way the elite enjoyed ocean cruises. You are surrounding yourself in history, and from the first introduction of your professional host to the arrival of your sommelier for your wine selection, you should realize that these moments are what makes cruising so different than any other vacation. Get used to the special attention paid to your table. My wife was enjoying her meal slowly and would rest between courses as we chatted. A very concerned maitre d' discreetly walked up to our table and quietly asked my wife if there was something wrong with the food because they'd been observing her eating habits. She assured them that it was delicious and that the level of service was beyond compare, much to the relief of the 3 staff members who were attending our table. If you arrive with a group, which we did after our initial dinner, we just had to bring Mats, Berna, Sherry, and Jaren with us another time, you can all enjoy a conversation in a private seating area. Again, notice the wooden panels from the original Olympic ship and think back to when it was being built. It's quite possible that the same hands that crafted such beautiful woodwork quite possibly touched the finishing decor on the Titanic as well. As a matter of fact, the Olympic and Titanic actually changed names because apparently one of them was behind in the construction and another one was ahead of schedule, so they switched the names of the ships around. If you have a larger group for up to 8 people, there's a specific room complete with its own private wine cellar that you can use. It is completely separate from the other parts of the Olympic dining room, offering not only privacy, but discretion as well. Here's the entrance to the private dining room on the Olympic. You can see the wine cellar area in behind the table, and the sommelier must go through years of training before being allowed to offer wine pairing with dinner. For an extra charge of $140 each person, you can experience a perfectly paired wine with each course. However, the more courses you have, the more tipsy you can become, and I have gout, so red wine is completely off my list of indulgences. I do, however, enjoy a fine glass of port, and that can be acquired in any number of places on board the ship. After an incredible meal, an unequal dessert, it's time for the staff to roll this little temptation toward your table and then do something that really clinches the deal. They beam a huge smile at you both and say, "Would you care for an after-dinner drink?" Well, that's like asking if water is wet. On that cart, you can choose from a wide variety of silky smooth or rough and tumble multicolored comforts. So I enjoyed a nice heated brandy, and Pat had a specialty coffee. If you consider that everything you touch, taste, look at, or otherwise engage in is of the highest caliber on this ship, you'll wonder why it took you so long to take a cruise in the first place. Well, for those who are indeed curious about dining in the Olympic, here's a picture of a cozy corner table that seems to have your name on it. Have a seat. You won't regret a moment in this very special place. Here's a picture of Pat standing on a chilly, windswept deck to our first port of call. If you've liked what you've seen so far, there's lots more adventures waiting. Come join us as we take our merry band of friends to some historic and rustic places, sure to encourage you to take that long-awaited Alaska cruise. Until next podcast show, so long for now, Rick and Pat.